Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are taking our third look at what is now Hurricane Ian and is well past the status of, a minimal hurricane. I mean, this thing has rapidly intensified and we are in a much different place now than we were just 24 short hours ago. So without further ado, we're just going to get right into it here. Starting off with, well, what is it? It is a Category 2 100-mile-an-hour wind hurricane now. So yeah, big change from where we were 24 hours ago. Like, I think the last video I did yesterday was still a tropical storm, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in the, in between that tropical storm and hurricane status. But either way, it was not this strong 24 hours ago. And you can see this track has bent to the right. Kind of like how it looked at first, when we first started to keep an eye on it, it's kind of like a hook like this was kind of what the track was, and then it kind of started, evolving into more something like this, and now we got something kind of like in between that, where it kind of hooks right, hugs the coast, and goes straight up. And this makes it bad news for both West and East Florida. I mean, Western Florida, you got hurricane warnings now for Tampa and Clearwater, I think even down to St. Petersburg. And then you got hurricane watches kind of stemming off of that, and then tropical storm warnings for southwestern Florida around where Naples is. Even southeastern Georgia and east coast of Florida, I think that's like Okeechobee there, have the tropical storm watches. And of course, hurricane warnings still for Cuba, as it's going to approach Cuba as what they're still calling a major hurricane. And I think that is definitely in the realm of possibility. Look at this thing on satellite, much different from yesterday. I mean, we got this core that has just been expanding, and we're starting to see now some convection, some additional convection develop near the eye. I mean, there's really not a defined eye, but there definitely is one sitting under there. You can definitely tell there's one sitting there. If you were to go to like radars and stuff, you can see that there's kind of like an eye, but it's not really visible on satellite. Maybe once it gets to major hurricane status, you'll be able to see that. But there has definitely been convection firing up to the south as well. And we're expecting this to continue to intensify, possibly another rapid intensification night to night. We'll see. It's definitely what happened last night, but obviously, at night these things can really, get themselves together. So we're going to watch this as it continues to move to the north-northwest at 13 miles an hour. And when I saw it was about 155 miles off of, Cuba. So, math would tell us that it's just under 12 hours away. So it's got another, we'll say, 10 hours at the least, because you have to account once it gets to shallower water. It might not strengthen as much. But either way, 10 to 12 hours more over, I mean, this could easily strengthen another 10 to 20 miles an hour in terms of wind speed before it closes in. It could even strengthen by more than that. Now, reconnaissance. So NOAA and Air Force have just kind of entered the storm. They kind of left around 4:30-ish or somewhere around that time. So there's the NOAA one. There's the Air Force one. And by the way, they did not find 170 knot winds. Those are just kind of glitches, but We'll update this. We'll see where we're at towards the end of the video, because usually these videos are about 20-ish minutes long. So we'll see where we're at by the end. But if not, there's always the community tab. I can keep you guys updated over there on it. All right, so again, here's the track right here. Now, if we look at more interactive map, this can tell us. Now, if you actually use, what I was doing was actually using this to kind of scale how wide. From 11 a.m. till now, in terms of how wide is the, the tropical storm force winds, it went from 170 miles wide to 190. So it did, in about 6 hours, it did get about 20 miles wider. And this wind field is going to continue to expand as it moves north, by the way, because the storm's going to grow, it's going to strengthen, and when it encounters that wind shear, we know that's just going to spread the storm out even more, increase that wind field and that rain field as well. So 120 mile an hour hurricane is what the Hurricane Center has forecast, with gusts to 150 as it approaches Cuba. Then 130 and even 140 with gusts to 165 here as it closes in on Florida. Now, again, it may not be that strong when it hits Florida, because you're going to start to see still 130 and then 115. Depends how much shear is still in place in the Gulf. Maybe the water temperatures are warmer, they can keep up with it, but the shear can really tear this thing apart. Also, another factor would be the dry air, how much dry air can really work its way in there. So we do have the storm surge warnings now from Tampa, St. Petersburg, all the way down to Naples and the southwestern tip of Florida here. And here we have the tropical storm watches now from around Apalachicola, and then storm surge watches even up the Palm Coast in Jacksonville. And then going down the eastern shoreline, Vero Beach, Melbourne, and almost down the West Palm, including Lake Okeechobee, you guys have the tropical storm watches in effect. So again, tropical storm conditions not ruled out for you guys. All right. You can see that kind of goes down to Port St. Lucie and Jupiter as well. All right, so let's zoom out here. So again, 130 mile an hour Cat 4. And keep in mind, it may be out here, but again, that wind field will be expanding. So we could still see impacts as it's a Cat 4. Then it's going to be here as a Cat 3, and then probably making landfall, according to the Hurricane Center, as a Category 1. Officially at landfall, or it's actually going to go up the coast around then Homosassa Springs right there. It could make landfall. But remember, this could almost be like a Sandy. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, even though it landfalls as a Category 1, it could still it's still going to have a lot of impacts, right? Because we're going to start seeing the impacts as it's still a Cat 3 and 4. Actually, a better one to compare this to would be Katrina, because Katrina was a Category 5 out up in the Gulf, and then it closed in on Louisiana as a Category 3 when it made landfall, and it still brought the 28 feet of storm surge. And so it's a Cat 4, and it will be a Cat 4 or 3, more likely, one of those two. And you'll start seeing impacts if you're on the western coast of Florida. You will start seeing the impacts as it's still a major hurricane. So do keep that in mind. New rainfall map is out from around 4:21 p.m. And you can see a lot of Florida in the 6 to 10 inch zone. Miami. Orlando's kind of in a little circle here, but suburbs of Orlando is 6 to 10 inches. Jacksonville 6 to 10. Tallahassee, you're right on the line, so we'll put you around 6. Tampa Bay is 6 to 10, but not too far up to your west. Maybe closer to Homosassa Springs. You guys have that 10 to 15 inches. Now 15 to 20 and 20 plus look to stay offshore, but again, a little jog to the east, which is what we've been seeing as a trend. So again, it could trend back the other way, but we'll be watching that as well. And even, not too far away from Savannah, like the Georgia coastline, Charleston, you guys can see 6 to 10 inches of rain. And then even outside of that, going all the way up to Wilmington, North Carolina, and even inland from the shores of Georgia and South Carolina, including Savannah, all right, still 4 to 6 inches is a lot of rain here. All right, so, basically, pretty much the entire Florida Peninsula and then the coastlines of the Carolinas and Georgia, at least in terms of the rain aspect, you guys will definitely be getting it hit pretty hard. Storm surge forecast, kind of the new one from the 5 p.m. update here. Still Tampa Bay around that 5 to 10 feet of storm surge here. And actually, if we look at, actually going to pull up here. Let's actually pull up, this. So here's Google Maps, and you can see why Tampa is going to be so prone to flooding. Because you're going to have the storm at some point sitting over here somewhere, and you're just going to have the wind driving up the Tampa Bay. And it's going to go into Old Tampa Bay. It's going to go into some of the rivers here. All right. I don't really know a lot of the river names. I think it's called the Hillsborough River, which I think the county that Tampa's in. So that's the Hillsborough River, right? You can see, it's going to go through all these rivers. It's going to go up the rivers, kind of like near where, I-75 and Route 301, kind of near those areas. And it's going to keep going, up those rivers. So you're going to have the ocean water that's going to flow up these rivers. You're also going to have the rainwater that's going to fall on these rivers. And then you're going to have the rivers themselves that are going to expand out because of the prior two things I just said. So it's like a triple whammy here in terms of, Tampa, because you guys are really getting it hit hard. So you got Tampa Bay, Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay right here, which is kind of like closer to downtown. So a lot of problems there for Tampa. And it's going to kind of just, the water's just going to spill over here. It might fill into St. Petersburg and Clearwater. So that's why Tampa's a little bit, more, flood prone than usual. If we look at the tropical storm force wind arrival times, we're going to look at earliest, traceable, and most likely. So practically the entire Florida Peninsula has, at the very least, 3/10 of a chance to see tropical storm force winds. And majority, especially north and even all the way down to south and south central, you guys have over a 50-50 shot to see those winds. So when are they going to arrive? Well, South Florida around 10-ish a.m. maybe, between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. tomorrow. If we go up toward more central Florida, maybe like overnight Tuesday, North Florida in the early Wednesday, and then the Carolinas by Thursday, going throughout the day. What about most likely? Most likely for Key West will be like around 2 p.m. Tuesday, and then Central Florida around, say, 12 to 2 p.m. on Wednesday, maybe around Jacksonville by Thursday morning, and then the Carolinas and Georgia maybe by late Thursday, and then Carolinas on Friday. So that's kind of your timeline there. Hurricane force wind probabilities. For Tampa, it's starting to go up now to about a 30 or 40% chance. But again, this is going to fill in as the storm gets closer. Like when Ian was far out, the tropical storm force wind probability map kind of looked like this, right? Because it was further out. So once it gets closer, these probabilities will go up. I can almost assure you. Like if you're in at least that second shade of green, your probability for hurricane force winds will probably be going up as the storm gets closer. Now, flash flooding map is an interesting, gap there, right, where Lake Okeechobee is and surrounding it. But a moderate flash flood threat, Tampa Bay, Orlando, the Space Coast, Miami, even down the Key West, you guys are going to have, that highest risk of flash flooding averaged out over the next 3 days, right? And again, it even goes up in the Georgia and South Carolina, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Carolinas and Georgia saw a little bit of storm surge. Now, as you saw in that map there, they were predicting about 2 to 4 feet around, right where Altamaha Sound is, kind of like in the very southern part of Georgia. But what I'm referring to is like going, towards Savannah, South Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina. Even as far north as you guys, you could see, wouldn't be surprised, just over a foot, maybe closing in on 2, but closer to a foot of storm surge, because you guys could see gusts to like 40 mile an hour plus, and the wind's going to be coming in like this because as Ian makes its way closer, the winds are going to kind of wrap around like this. So you guys are definitely going to see some storm surge as well, although, again, definitely going to be a lot worse, 5 or 8 times as worse on the western shore of Florida. So let's look at the European ensembles, right? Kind of like what the Hurricane Center is saying, right? Comes up to the northwest, and north kind of bends to the east a little bit, bends to the right, and it kind of comes straight up, and even kind of making a little jog left, almost. Right? But you can see a lot of models actually have it tracking over central Florida, which is really interesting. And as it's doing so, it's still like a 45, even up to a 55 mile an hour tropical storm, and there's a couple yellow lines in there, meaning maybe still like a 60 mile an hour tropical storm as it's going over central Florida. A lot of models have it going over there, but even more have it somewhere around Tampa, which is why the mean line is there. Now the GEFS ensembles, interestingly enough, actually, now this is the 12Z runs, so maybe when the next ones come out, maybe it'll be a little bit different, but still keep it a little bit west here, and that would be ideal, or not ideal, but better for Tampa and Orlando and Jacksonville, but still, even a few of the GEFS models have gone over there, and one brings it close to New Orleans. But once the new runs come out for those, maybe it'll be a little bit different now. Storm position currently, pretty much at about 83 degrees west and about 19.5 degrees north. It is still in what I like to call the super conducive zone, the super conducive development zone, because this is where the heat content is high, right where I just highlighted. It is high, like astronomically high almost, I would say. And combine that with sea surface temperatures, which are 86 and closer to 87 as it comes over here. So, it's gonna intensify. I wouldn't be surprised by the 8 p.m. advisory if it's either it could be a major hurricane by 8 p.m. and if not, then definitely by 11. I think it'll be a major hurricane because that's what we're gonna see in the Hurricane Hunter flights as the recon goes out there. They'll be swooping around just in time about 7 o'clock or so. So we'll know for the 8 p.m. update what those guys gather. And here's what kind of alarmed me here, because look at the 18Z track guidance. This was a big bend to the right. I mean, even from 12Z a little bit, because 12Z kind of had sort of like this. Now we got sort of like this. There's a lot of models, again, that go over Central Florida, or if not, a ton that converge on Tampa. And the models are actually like, what's funny is that the models are actually more in agreement that's going to go over like Virginia, North Carolina, into the mid-Atlantic than they are where it's going to make landfall, because a few have a landfall here, a few have a landfall in Tampa, a couple have a landfall closer to like Naples, around Cape Coral, I think is around down there. So I mean, it's interesting when they have agreement as opposed to not. But a lot of them still do have it getting very, very close, like dangerously close to Tampa, if not a landfall. And whether it's a few miles on shore or if it makes landfall, if it's like a few miles offshore of Tampa, that's not really going to make a difference. It's still well close enough. That wind field's going to be well big enough to still generate the same amount of storm surge as if it had made landfall. Now, here's a GEFS ensembles on the tropical tidbits here. You can see kind of like gets you more models that you can kind of see further out in time, but kind of like making a bend to the right as the storms usually do when they come up from the Gulf of Mexico. They get picked up by a front to some degree and kind of brought over the mid-Atlantic. Again, still a westerly trend, but I like to see what happens to these in the 18Z runs, although I'm refreshing and it's not out yet. If we look at the GEPS model tracks, I would just roll these out because they still have it like bending to the left completely. So those are Canadian models a little stupid because I think these are Canadian ensembles. I could be wrong. But this one and the Canadian main run, they had like the Canadian had. That's why I don't think I'm going to show the Canadian today because they had it closing in on Cuba as a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. And you think, well, that's kind of funny considering it's a Cat 2 monster right now. And, even a few hours from now, they had it as a tropical storm. I'm like, that's really weird. So I don't think that's going to be quite, what's going to happen. So the Canadian model is a little outlier. Too much of an outlier, I think, to, really be taken, seriously for right now. But we'll see what their next run comes out and says. Intensity guidance, again, most models, I would say, 90% have like a Cat 4. I would say like 95% have at least a Cat 3. And then kind of, slowly trending down from there. But notice, right, even 3 to 3.5 days out, a lot of models still have at least a Category 1 hurricane. And it may take 5 days from now to get rid of tropical storm status. Now, let's look at Florida, and I want to pull up the last 30 days and show you how much rainfall we normally see, right? Majority of the peninsula, I would say from Jacksonville to Orlando to Miami, in between Jacksonville and Miami, for the most part, is in that 6 to 8 inch range, which is typically the amount you see in 30 days, or at least from the end of August to the end of September is typically, you see like 6 to 8 inches of rain, right? Typically. I mean, there's some spots shaded differently. Now take a look at what we've seen in the last 30 days, and I'll turn down the opacity a little bit because it's a little high. Look at this. Plenty of spots here between Jacksonville and Miami have seen 10 to 15 inches. Now again, it's part of it's from those daily Florida thunderstorms. So again, it's very isolated. Some spots have seen close to 20 inches. Some spots have seen 8 or 10, but a lot. Like the majority shade here is, there's a lot shaded in that magenta color, which is 10 to 15 inches. All right, and I like to look at the percent from normal. And the majority of the peninsula, again, in this zone, has seen anywhere from 1.5 to 2 times the rainfall that they should be seeing in the last 30 days. And there's even a lot of areas, it's more localized, but there's even quite a few areas that have seen 2 to 3 times their rainfall. So any other rainfall is not needed here. All right, and if we look at, let's actually pull up departures from normal so we get the exact, look at this. There's a lot of areas here, 4, 5, even close to 8 inches of rain above average. Getting another 6 to 10 will not help with this. And I know Florida's soils are different and, they can, tolerate some rainfall. But still, when you look at this, it's like they've seen double the rainfall that they should be seeing in the last 30 days. And I think the last 30 days is a good measure, because when you're looking at droughts and stuff, look at the last 30 days. So I think the last 30 days is a good measure here in terms of rainfall anomalies. So here's the H-Wharf. Now, here's what's funny, is that the H-Wharf, for the last couple days, has been a west trending storm. They have been an advocate of an Apalachicola or somewhere around there, like a destined Florida landfall. Look what happened now. And you might think, oh, okay, well, that's still west of Tampa. Not much might hit in terms of wind and stuff, but that's true. But a little goes a long way because look at where they were, right? This is the same frame. The same time, but on a different run, right? So here's the 12Z run. Here is the same exact time, just on the last run. Yeah, look at that. It basically went from west. I think Apalachicola is around here. It went from west, and it ended up over here, which is a considerable shift to the east. Considering that H-Wharf, was a a Western track advocate, and now they completely shifted. Like even from here, right? Like look at that shift to the east. You can clearly see it. 6, 12. Then now, right? So, definitely something interesting. And also, they don't show weakening quite as much now. They went from it being barely a tropical storm to a, oops, I think I went the wrong way. Sorry, barely a tropical storm to, like a 70-mile-an-hour storm. I still don't think that's right. I think it'll be a little stronger. It's also going to be a little bit further to the east, in my opinion. But look, when it's parallel to Tampa, it could still be a deep, like, this is 120 knots, right? That is a Cat 4 because 100 knots is a Cat 3. So we're talking here Category 4 strength, as it's parallel to Tampa. And if it's brought a little bit further east, that could bring devastating impacts here to Tampa. If we look at the GFS solution, we actually might have an 18Z run starting to come out now. No, not yet. That's actually really interesting. Let me actually zoom out to, because I don't think that's right. The 18Z's got to be coming out. Yeah, it is. Okay. I think when you're zoomed in there, it kind of makes it harder to tell. But look at this. I mean, look at the 18Z run of the GFS. It's another shot to the east, right? So I'm bringing it up here. So this is Thursday afternoon. Okay, that's actually not much of a shift. That's a little shift to the east. But if we go to Thursday morning here, this is where you can notice the change. Then now. So even more strong winds are going to be brought right on the western coast of Florida here. And here's the stronger winds I was talking about here, around 40 knots. They're going to be going into Jacksonville and Georgia and like around Savannah. Let's look at the precipitation. Yeah, look at that. Skimming right up the coastline. You're going to start to see impacts, right? Around early Thursday morning, or late Wednesday, I should say. Because the rain's going to be in like Wednesday morning. Then the heavy stuff comes in late Wednesday, early Thursday, all through Thursday, and then, in through Friday, and then going up through the Mid-Atlantic eventually. If we look at this is like Hurricane Analysis Forecast System, I think is the abbreviation. I could be wrong. 12Z is not coming out for some reason, but if we look at 6Z from this morning, you can see, look what happens. I mean, it is sitting right next to Tampa. It is 110 knots. That's about borderline category. I think that's a category 4. That's about 100. That's in between 125 and 130 miles an hour. So still a Cat 4 sitting. I mean, the low is right on Tampa at this point, and it just sits there until Friday, where it just kind of gets shot out. One more point I want to bring up here. We have come to the conclusion, but one more point I want to bring up is, as this could be the one little headwind for Ian here. So it's kind of sitting around here. I mean, kind of pretend like this map is not here. I really wish it wasn't, but if Ian's sitting right here, and it's going to be tracking over western Cuba, it's going to have a little bit of mountainous terrain to go over. Now, a little bit. I mean, like upwards of 1,000 feet, which in terms of mountains is not that high, but it still could put a hinder in the storm's development, right? Which is why if it had gone around Cuba altogether or skimmed the western coast, nothing would have happened to it. But if it's going over here now, like they're starting to say, that could put a little damper either. I mean, the storm's pretty strong at this point, so not much may happen to it. It may just stall development, or it may drop like a few miles per hour. But, almost rest assured, not almost rest assured, that once it gets back over, we see like a lag time and it starts to redevelop again. And, we see where wind shear, we have to watch the wind shear as well. So I hope to keep you guys updated some more. Thank you guys for watching. This was definitely a big change from 24 hours ago, and 24 hours ago was a big change from 48 hours ago. So that's why you got to keep checking in here. Keep tuned. I am The Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I will catch you guys in the next video.